It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show for Monday, January 20th, 2025. We do the show live, 7 to 8 o'clock, Monday through Friday on KSLQ, FM 104.5, and also on our streaming service. And the reason I mentioned the date, because this would reference what we talk about from this point on. Inauguration Day, John. Are you excited or what?
Oh, yeah. It's just fantastic. What a joyous day today, Brad. And you know what? Like, think of the anticipation we've had for so long. And over the weekend, I saw so many of those compilation videos where in the weeks prior to the election, all the smarty pants and the national media and celebrities were talking about how Trump had no chance. And it's like the best collection of videos you've seen since he got elected in 2016.
I'm reading the story right now. The Biden pardons Mark Milley, Anthony Fauci, J6 committee members. President Biden pardoned Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, and others who have some speculated may have faced investigations under incoming Trump administration on Monday. I can't even talk this morning. Biden's pardon come just hours before he is set to depart the White House, and President-elect Trump takes the oath of office once again. The pardon also applies to a litany of people involved in the January 6th Select Committee investigation. What do you think about this, John?
This is the first I've heard of it, Brad. To quote Donald Trump in a famous meme, wow, this is the first I've heard of that. Brad, when you mentioned that at the beginning of A Block today, I thought you were joking.
No.
I had no idea that you were serious.
Oh.
So he's pardoning Fauci et al. Because he anticipates that they're going to be busted by Trump.
In addition to the named individuals, the pardon applies to, quote, members of Congress and staff who served on the Select Committee and the U.S. Capitol and D.C. Metropolitan Police officers who testified before the Select Committee. There's dozens of people there. Notably, Special Counsel Jack Smith, former FBI Director Christopher Wray, Attorney General Merrick Garland are not included in the pardon, despite speculation they may face backlash from the incoming administration. And it goes on. The article talks about Milley thanked Biden in a statement on Monday. My family and I are deeply grateful for the president's action today. He wrote, after 43 years of faithful service in uniform to our nation, protecting and defending the Constitution, I do not wish to spend whatever remaining time the Lord grants me fighting those who unjustly might seek retribution for perceived slights. By the way, there was an interesting thing that came out of Hegseth's testimony last week when he was being interviewed by the Congress people who were very rude to him, but that's the way it always is. You know, the opposing people are always rude to the incoming staff or cabinet members. He threw out a very interesting number, okay? 4-star generals. I think once upon a time there was a 5-star general, but I learned something from Brian Nieves, which has always stuck with me, okay? Do you know the difference between a brigadier, lieutenant, a major, and a general is?
No idea, no.
Okay, the rank is, this is what Brian taught me, and it served me well. Be my little general. Brigadier is the 4th up. That's a 1-star general. Major is a 2-star general. Lieutenant is a 3-star general. And a general is a 4-star general. Be my little general, okay? Pete Hegseth talked about the fact that in World War II, there were 7 4-star generals in all of World War II, okay? Guess how many there are at this very moment?
3.
43.
So in other words, what he's saying is we're watering it down and just giving everybody a 4-star general rank.
Well, essentially what he's also saying is there's too much weight at the top and not enough stuff at the bottom. You know, if
I see. Yeah. Okay.
If we won World War II with 7 generals, among them Patton and Eisenhower and people like that, why do we need 43 generals today? And you know what? He said that. I thought to myself, I never even thought, that's a statistic I never heard before. 43 generals. And when you think about that, what do 43 generals do? You know, I know and once again, there are various, and I think he wasn't talking about all the brigadier, the major and lieutenant generals. He was talking about 4-star generals. So how many generals are there if you can consider all the different ranks of generals? I mean, there are probably hundreds of them because there's...
Yeah, that seems like they're just giving them out like candy, right?
Well,
like participation trophies.
His point was, Hegseth's point was that and I guess when you've been in the military, you see this, that the political butt kissers, maybe they're not necessarily butt kissers, but they're political people and they're because you know that, John. I mean, there's people that you know in the course of you following government. There are people that are like hey, let's go have cocktails and we'll talk about this. And then there's the worker bees, the guys who are not.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, Brad.
They're the guys who are not necessarily hanging out and backslapping and shaking hands and, tipping brewskis and, hey, boy, what a great hole you had on 14 yesterday and we played out at the country club, that kind of stuff. They're the worker bees who are actually doing stuff. But those are the people that don't get promoted because they don't do all the brown nosing and stuff like that, right? Is that the way it sort of works?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I get exactly what you mean.
Okay, so anyway, on with that. Okay, you sent me something interesting. And first off, can I make one other comment that I've been thinking about?
Oh, yeah, please do.
There's a guy, I think he's a state lawmaker in Tennessee, who's trying to get the Nashville airport renamed the Donald Trump Airport, okay? Now, I've said this before. I'll say this again. Even though I'm sort of, preferential to Trump, I'm tired of all the politicians getting things named after them. I mean, enough's enough. And I think we should look no farther than right here in St. Louis, a boy who was born in North City, who grew up and became a very heroic Navy pilot in World War II, who was shot down in 1943, won I don't know how many awards, won the Medal of Honor. And you know what? You know what airport's named after him?
None.
O'Hare Airport in Chicago.
Wow. Hey, I didn't know that story, Brad.
Yes, O'Hare Airport. Butch, his name is Edward Butch O'Hare, born in the city of St. Louis. Matter of fact, there's an interesting story that I read over the weekend again, because I did a little research on this, that after he got the Medal of Honor, he had a victory parade. This is like, I think, in 1942, in the downtown streets of St. Louis, where everybody cheered him on the whole bit. And the other interesting aspect of it was his father was murdered by the Capone crime family. Did you know this part of the story, too?
No, I did not know that.
Yes, his father apparently became a snitch for the federal government and testified in front of some, court or jurisdiction or investigative authority. And a week later, he was shot to death in his car, I believe in St. Louis. So I say again, stop naming stuff after politicians. I went on a sort of a little bit of a rant years ago when the new Highway 19 bridge, which crosses the Missouri River in Herman, there was at the time, and I cannot remember his name, but there was a very heroic young guy who went off and joined the Army, I believe, and he was born and raised in Herman, Missouri, I believe he became an officer and died a very, very valiant death in one of the Gulf or the Afghanistan War, Gulf War, stuff like that. And I said that if Christopher Bond were smart, because there was a local groundswell about this, about renaming this bridge, because they're going to call it the Christopher S. Bond Bridge. And I said, if Christopher Bond was smart, he'd stand up to the lectern and say, I appreciate the offer, but the name is going to be, and I can't remember the man's name. Enough of the stupid politics getting things named after them. For example, I've asked several people. There's a new overpass on I-70. I don't know if you know this or not. You know that overpass, the new one they built on 70 between Wentzville and Forestel? You know what I'm talking about?
I can't picture it, but I take your word for it.
It's a brand new interchange out there. Matter of fact, I think they just built a quick trip and the whole bit. And it's an overpass. You go underneath it. I think it's called the David Hochul Expressway, the David Hochul Parkway. Who's David Hochul? I don't know. And to the point where I still say there's an overpass when you go west on 364, the Page Expressway, whatever you want to call it, and you cross over the Missouri River into St. Charles County out of Maryland Heights. That very first overpass has a name on it as well, too. I think there should be a law that states if you're going to name stuff after people, stick a big explanatory plaque right there. This is named after so-and-so and so-and-so. This is the way we name. You know what I mean? Because most people go like, okay, who's David Hochul? Who's, for example, there's another overpass in St. Charles County on I-70, the Ralph Barali overpass, okay? I know Ralph Barali, but it's the wrong Ralph Barali. Ralph Barali is a chiropractor, teaches, I don't think he's retired yet. He teaches out at Logan. And one day I asked him, I said, is that your overpass out there? No, I don't even know who that is. Well, he does know who it is, but it's somebody in his family. It's remote. It has the exact same name as it, spelled the same way, the whole bit. But yet, And he told me the story. The guy was some war hero or something like that. That's fine. You start to see that now in some of the interstates where you see signs dedicated to, various service members who lost their lives in protection for our country. It gives their branch of service. I think that's great. No more politicians. Just like it used to be McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, now it's the Harry Reid Airport. I mean, come on, Harry Reid. That's somebody we want to look up to. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that would be.
Go ahead, Brad.
That would be like saying the Mike Madigan Airport in Illinois. You know what I'm saying? Who's now under.
Yeah, well, I get off at the Blagojevich Expressway when I'm going to Sauget. Here's the deal, though, Brad. I get what you're saying about having like a memorial sign up. I think it's a good idea. And I think like they could take the model of, I don't know if you've been out there, but when you go into Klondike Park, they have a giant thing in honor of Unilever. Unilever is the one that makes the Klondike bars. And you can read all about the Unilever Corporation. It's really good corporate communications, I think. And then because they have thousands of people going through Klondike Park every day, think of the visibility that the brand gets from families that use Klondike Park.
Isn't Mr. Lamping behind that? Didn't he put that big? Didn't he?
He did, yeah. He got a funding bill for that back when he was in the legislature. And then at first, he just worked out a deal where his permanent office at 97-1 would be named the Klondike Room. But then over time, he got a sign that was put up at Klondike Park.
Okay, John sends me this article. You want to talk about the article you sent me about the guy who was on, some drug rehabilitation not-for-profit who ends up turning up being like a drug dealer and a convicted...
Oh, that story. Yeah, so I was thinking about the one where a gentleman in Jefferson County sent
that's a good one.
The county sheriff a note saying that he looked really good in khakis.
Okay, tell that story. That one is actually kind of funny.
Yeah, so this is a story brought to us by Colleen Schrappen from the Post-Dispatch. So long story short, in Jefferson County, there was an assistant prosecutor who was waiting at a jury room, and there happened to be a public defender that I guess he knew, a guy named Charles Agana. And the first guy, who's an assistant prosecutor, Argana, the public defender, had left his laptop open and left the room. And there were a bunch of other attorneys in the room, according to this story. And this first guy, Hollingsworth, who's the prosecutor, got on, I'm guessing it's his buddy's, public defender's laptop and sent a note to the county sheriff, Brad. And the note said, "You look so good in khaki pants and that black shirt." So everybody, according to this story, got a good laugh out of it. Somebody went to the sheriff ahead of time and said, "Hey, this guy Tom sent you a wacky email from Charles' account. It's not real. Charles obviously isn't flattering how good you look in khaki pants." And then, however, there was a complaint levied against Hollingsworth. He was suspended for 2 days and put on a performance improvement plan. I guess the punchline is, Brad, the Missouri Supreme Court, which I guess looks at ethics of attorneys, I think they're in charge of deciding what punishments attorneys get, suspended Tom Hollingsworth's license indefinitely. And he also has to pay a $1,000 fee for sending this email.
And Kim Gardner got away with what? Never got her license suspended, right? Right.
Exactly. Now, Brad, this isn't a perfect parallel, but think about the story of Missouri State when the gentleman was back in Idaho or Utah and did a prank with one of his fellow administrators about a vasectomy. Like, you clearly can't do anything that's funny. And I'm guessing this gentleman had a good relationship with the public defender to send a silly email to the sheriff. It sounds like everybody knew each other, but boy, talk about taking something too seriously, Brad.
Well, who actually filed the complaint? Was it
That's a great question. So I don't think it says in here as I'm scrolling through this now, and I'm not an expert on the story, but I don't see who left or who filed the complaint. And this guy Hollingsworth said, "It was funny in the room with me," according to court documents. Wow. The sheriff was told ahead of time he was suspended. And this gentleman submitted written apologies both to the sheriff. I mean, I guess you got to apologize if you say somebody looks good in khakis, and the guy. And this guy, the guy that was the public defender, was appointed as a judge by Governor Parson recently. But anyway, and I guess the complaint was that this prosecutor could have accessed by touching the public defender's laptop, he could have accessed confidential information because that gentleman had access to confidential information about the defendant. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds like somebody has no sense of humor here.
Sometimes you look at this stuff and you think, okay, hold it. You know what we need? You know what we need, John?
What's that?
You know what we need? We need Rodney.
I want to say, can we all get along? Can we get along?
We need Rodney, right? Okay, the article you sent me, that was actually inside another article, but the article you sent me was about that. But within that article, on your amazing archive page, there was the story of the guy in the city. Tell this story. You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, so a gentleman that was put in charge of violence prevention, I believe, was charged with drug crimes. Now, Brad, I don't think I linked to this story. I could be mistaken. Because I'm not an expert on this, but it turns out that Mayor Tashara Jones has an office of violent crime prevention. Maybe we should talk about it after the break. That might give you or me a chance to get smartened up about it a little bit.
Well, essentially, long story made short, he was working either directly, indirectly for the city. Correct? Wasn't that the deal?
That's correct. Yeah.
And it turns out that as I read the story, he was already convicted of a previous murder? Wasn't that the story as well, too?
Yeah, I think so. But then he was also charged with something else while he was in that.
Ah, man.
Yeah. So here's the headline. St. Louis Cure Violence worker was charged. Man was face of crime prevention in St. Louis. He also worked for a multi-state drug dealer.
Right. and he arranged.
Yeah, his name is Jerome Williams. Yeah.
And he arranged, while he was serving in this position, there was some story about that somebody had broken into a count house. Essentially, that's where they count all the drug money. And somebody was supposedly guarding the count house, but they really weren't. And they were accusing him of being on the inside of the robbery of the count house where they stole all this money. And this guy flew him to St. Louis. He had him picked up at the airport. They took him down to Penrose Park in the city, and they killed him. And I'm going like, how bizarre is this? This guy's working for the city, once again, either directly or indirectly through a charity, and he's the cure the violence czar kind of dude. Isn't what his position is?
Yeah.
Another reason why.
Well, and I know, Brad, we've talked about it before. You haven't seen the movie Training Day, but in the movie, Denzel Washington's point is that, hey, if you're going to learn how to deal with drug dealers, you got to maybe do a little drugs. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you got to hang out with drug dealers. If you're going to learn how to prevent violence, maybe you need to take part in a murder of a drug dealer.
So, in other words, if you're going to be a police officer, you need to drive 100 miles an hour down the highway and weave in and out of traffic so you know what it's like when you pull somebody over for that, or you need to drive while you're drunk. Is that the same line of reasoning?
Yes, that's exactly the same logic, Brad. I don't know how you could argue with that logic.
I don't know how I could either. Okay, we didn't take a break. And Rodney, once again, thank you.
I want to say, can we all get along? Can we get along?
I don't think it's possible.